Mom went berserk over a closet. Dad broke down crying. Our family would never be the same. Today started like any other day, but it quickly spiraled into one of the most emotionally draining experiences of my life. I'm Jake, 19, and I live with my parents and younger sister, Lily, 16. Our family has always had its ups and downs, but nothing could have prepared me for the chaos that unfolded. It all began with what seemed like a simple request from Lily. She's been asking our mom, Sarah, to move some stuff out of her closet for months now. These weren't even Lily's things, just random junk that had accumulated over time. Every time Lily brought it up, Mom would brush it off or promise to do it later. Today, though, something was different. I was in my room, headphones on, trying to focus on some college assignments when I heard raised voices from downstairs. At first, I ignored it, figuring it was just another petty argument. But as the volume increased, I decided to investigate. As I made my way down the stairs, I could hear Lily's frustrated voice. "Mom, I've been asking for months. Why can't you just take 10 minutes to move your stuff?" Mom's response was cold and dismissive. "I don't have time for this right now, Lily. Just leave it alone." I entered the living room to find Lily standing with her arms crossed, face flushed with anger, while Mom sat on the couch, deliberately avoiding eye contact and scrolling through her phone. "Come on, Mom," I interjected, trying to mediate. "It's not that big of a deal. I can help move the stuff if you want." Mom shot me a glare that could freeze hell. "Stay out of this, Jake. It's none of your business." Lily, apparently emboldened by my presence, pressed on. "This is ridiculous. You're acting like a child, Mom. Why can't you just talk to me?" That's when Dad, Tom, walked in from the garage. He must have sensed the tension because he immediately tried to defuse the situation. "What's going on here? Why don't we all calm down and..." But before he could finish, Mom stood up abruptly, her face a mask of barely contained rage. Without a word, she stormed upstairs, leaving the three of us in stunned silence. For a moment, we just stood there, exchanging confused glances. Dad sighed heavily, running a hand through his thinning hair. "I'll go talk to her," he said, but there was a weariness in his voice that suggested he'd been through this routine many times before. As Dad headed upstairs, Lily turned to me, her eyes brimming with frustrated tears. "I don't get it, Jake. Why is she like this? All I want is to organize my own room." I put an arm around her shoulders, feeling helpless. "I don't know, Lil. Maybe she's stressed about something else?" We stood there for a few minutes, listening to the muffled sounds of Dad trying to reason with Mom. It seemed like things were calming down, and Lily decided to go to her room to cool off. I retreated to the kitchen, thinking I'd make us all some tea. It always seemed to help in tense situations. As I was waiting for the kettle to boil, I heard a sudden commotion upstairs. There was a loud thud, followed by Lily's startled scream. Without thinking, I bolted up the stairs, taking them two at a time. The scene that greeted me was surreal. Mom had burst into Lily's room and was furiously pulling items out of the closet, flinging them onto the floor with reckless abandon. Clothes, books, old toys, everything was being tossed about like confetti at a particularly aggressive parade. Lily was backed into a corner, her eyes wide with shock and fear. "Mom! Stop it! What are you doing?" she cried, but her pleas fell on deaf ears. I stood in the doorway, momentarily paralyzed by the bizarre spectacle. "What the hell is going on?" I finally managed to yell. Mom whirled around, her eyes wild. "Stay out of this, Jake. This doesn't concern you." But I couldn't just stand by and watch. I stepped into the room, my hands raised in what I hoped was a calming gesture. "Mom, please. This isn't solving anything. You're scaring Lily." As if on cue, Lily let out a choked sob. The sound seemed to snap Mom out of her frenzy for a moment, but instead of calming down, she just redirected her anger. "Oh, so now I'm the bad guy?" she spat. "I do everything for this family, and this is the thanks I get? Ungrateful children who can't even keep their rooms clean." "That's not fair, Mom," Lily shouted back, finding her voice. "I've been trying to clean, but you won't let me move your stuff." And just like that, we were all yelling. Mom was screaming about respect and gratitude, Lily was crying and shouting about fairness, and I was trying to be heard over both of them, pleading for everyone to calm down. In the chaos, I almost didn't notice Dad. He was standing just outside the room, leaning against the wall with his head in his hands. But then I heard it, a sound that chilled me to my core. Dad was crying. Not just a few quiet tears, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. His face was contorted in anguish, and when he spoke, his voice was high and trembling, barely recognizable. No, no, please stop, he cried. Please, please, no. The room fell silent as we all turned to look at him. In that moment, he seemed so small, so broken. This man who had always been our rock, our voice of reason, was crumbling before our eyes. I moved towards him instinctively, wrapping my arms around him from behind. Dad, it's okay. Come on, let's go to your room. But he wouldn't budge. He just kept repeating, you don't understand. It's my fault. I can't talk about it. His words made no sense to me, but the pain in his voice was unbearable. I looked back at Mom and Lily, silently pleading for help, but they seemed as shocked and confused as I was. Slowly, the anger drained from Mom's face, replaced by a mix of concern and guilt. Lily wiped her tears, looking lost and scared. The room that had moments ago been a battlefield now felt like a tomb, heavy with the weight of unspoken words and suppressed emotions. Eventually, we managed to coax Dad to his bedroom. Mom went with him, her earlier fury replaced by a gentle tenderness I hadn't seen in years. Lily retreated to her room, closing the door softly behind her. And me? I was left standing in the hallway, feeling like I'd just survived a hurricane. My mind was reeling, trying to process everything that had happened. The image of Dad breaking down kept replaying in my head, his anguished cries echoing in my ears. I wanted to help, to fix things somehow, but I didn't even know where to start. How had a simple request about closet space turned into this family-wide meltdown? And what did Dad mean when he said it was his fault? As the house settled into an uneasy quiet, I made my way back to my room. I knew I should try to sleep, it was late, and I had classes in the morning, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in our family dynamic. Lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but wonder what tomorrow would bring. Would we pretend nothing happened, as we'd done so many times before? Or would this be the catalyst for some much-needed changes? With a heavy sigh, I closed my eyes, hoping that sleep would come and temporarily erase the memory of this disastrous day. But even as I drifted off, I could still hear Dad's broken voice, pleading for us to stop. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a long and difficult journey for our family. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a truck. My eyes were puffy from crying, and my head throbbed with a dull ache. For a moment, I hoped that yesterday's events had just been a bad dream. But as I became more alert, the memories came flooding back, each one more painful than the last. I lay in bed for a while, dreading the thought of facing my family. What would I say? How would they act? The uncertainty was almost worse than the conflict itself. Finally, hunger and the need to use the bathroom forced me out of bed. As I opened my door, I was struck by the eerie silence that permeated the house. Usually, at this time, I'd hear Mom bustling around in the kitchen, the TV playing softly in the background, or Lily's music drifting from her room. Today, there was nothing. I made my way downstairs cautiously, as if walking through a minefield. The living room was empty, but I could see a light on in the kitchen. Taking a deep breath, I walked in. Dad was sitting at the table, staring into a mug of what I assumed was coffee. He looked like he hadn't slept at all, his eyes were bloodshot, and his usually neatly combed hair was a disheveled mess. "Morning, Dad," I said softly, not wanting to startle him. He looked up, and the sadness in his eyes made my heart clench. "Morning, Jake," he replied, his voice hoarse. I grabbed a bowl and some cereal, more out of habit than actual hunger. As I sat down across from Dad, I struggled to find something to say. How do you start a conversation after what happened last night? "Where's Mom?" I finally asked, figuring it was a safe enough topic. Dad sighed heavily. "She left early this morning. Said she needed some time to think." I nodded, pushing my cereal around in the bowl. "And Lily?" "Still in her room, I think. She hasn't come down yet." We lapsed into silence again, the only sound the soft clink of my spoon against the bowl. I wanted to ask about last night, to understand what had triggered such an extreme reaction from both him and Mom. But looking at Dad's defeated posture, I couldn't bring myself to broach the subject. After a few minutes, Dad cleared his throat. "Jake, about last night." He began, then trailed off, seemingly at a loss for words. "It's okay, Dad," I said quickly, not sure if I was ready for this conversation. "We don't have to talk about it if you don't want to." He shook his head. "No, we need to talk about it. What happened? It wasn't right. Your mother and we've been dealing with some issues for a while now, and we've done a poor job of shielding you and Lily from it." I put down my spoon, giving Dad my full attention. This was the most he'd ever opened up about any problems between him and Mom. What kind of issues? I asked cautiously. Dad ran a hand over his face, looking every bit as 50 years. It's complicated, Jake. Your mom. She's been struggling with some mental health issues. Depression, anxiety. We thought we had it under control, but lately, it's been getting worse. This revelation hit me like a punch to the gut. Mom had always been high-strung and prone to mood swings, but I'd never considered that it might be a diagnosable condition. Why didn't you tell us? I asked, a mix of confusion and hurt in my voice. We didn't want to worry you kids, Dad replied, his voice tinged with regret. And I suppose we were in denial ourselves. It's not easy to admit that your family isn't as perfect as you want it to be. I nodded, trying to process this new information. It explained a lot, Mom's unpredictable outbursts, her periods of withdrawal, the tension that often simmered just below the surface of our family interactions. So, last night. I began, not sure how to phrase my question. Last night was a breaking point, Dad finished for me. Your mom's been feeling overwhelmed, and Lily's request about the closet. It was just the straw that broke the camel's back, I guess. And me, well. He trailed off, his eyes growing distant. Dad? I prompted gently. He seemed to shake himself out of whatever memory had gripped him. I've been trying to hold everything together for so long, Jake. Being the mediator, the peacekeeper. It takes a toll. Last night, I just couldn't do it anymore. I felt like I'd failed all of you. I reached across the table, placing my hand on his arm. You haven't failed us, Dad. We're a family. We're supposed to support each other, not put everything on your shoulders. A small, sad smile flickered across his face. When did you get so wise, huh? Before I could respond, we heard footsteps on the stairs. A moment later, Lily appeared in the doorway, looking as exhausted as I felt. Hey, she said quietly, hovering uncertainly at the edge of the kitchen. Come sit down, sweetheart, Dad said, patting the chair next to him. We were just talking about last night. Lily moved to the table, her movements cautious as if she expected another explosion at any moment. As she sat down, I noticed the dark circles under her eyes and the way she kept fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. Where's Mom? She asked, echoing my earlier question. Dad repeated what he'd told me about Mom needing time to think. Then, taking a deep breath, he began to explain about Mom's mental health struggles. As he talked, I watched Lily's face, seeing a mix of emotions play across it, surprise, confusion, and ultimately, a dawning understanding. By the time Dad finished, there were tears in her eyes. Is that why she gets so angry sometimes? Lily asked, her voice small. Dad nodded. It's part of it, yes. But that doesn't excuse her behavior, especially last night. What she did was wrong, and I'm so sorry you had to experience that. Lily wiped at her eyes. I feel terrible now. If I'd known, I wouldn't have pushed so hard about the closet. No, Lily, I interjected. You didn't do anything wrong. You had a reasonable request, and Mom's reaction wasn't your fault. Dad nodded in agreement. Jake's right. We should have been more open with you both about what's been going on. Keeping it secret. Well, it clearly hasn't helped anyone. We sat in silence for a moment, each lost in our own thoughts. It was a lot to take in, and I knew we were only scratching the surface of our family's issues. So, what happens now? I finally asked, voicing the question that I'm sure was on all our minds. Dad sighed, running a hand through his hair. Well, first, we need to talk to your mom when she gets back. As a family. No more secrets, no more tiptoeing around issues. And he paused, seeming to steel himself. I think it's time we looked into family therapy. Lily and I exchanged glances. The idea of sitting in a room with a stranger, talking about our problems, was a bit daunting. But after last night, it was clear that we needed help. Okay, Lily said softly. If you think it'll help. I nodded in agreement. Yeah, we're in. Dad's eyes welled up with tears, but this time, they seemed to be of relief rather than anguish. I'm proud of you both, he said, his voice thick with emotion. We've got a long road ahead, but we'll get through this together. As we sat there, the three of us united in our determination to heal our fractured family, I felt a glimmer of hope. Last night had been a nightmare, but maybe, just maybe, it would be the wake-up call we needed to make things better. Little did we know, the challenges we'd face in the coming weeks would test our resolve in ways we never could have imagined. The rest of the day passed in a strange, tense limbo. We all tried to go about our normal routines. I worked on some assignments, Lily did her homework, and Dad puttered around the house doing odd jobs, but there was an undercurrent of anxiety running through everything. Every time a car passed by outside, we'd all freeze, wondering if it was Mom returning. But as the hours ticked by and the sun began to set, she still hadn't come home. Should we call her? Lily asked over dinner, which consisted of hastily made sandwiches. None of us had much of an appetite. Dad shook his head. Let's give her a bit more time. If she's not back by morning, then we'll reach out. I nodded in agreement with Dad, but I couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled in my stomach. As we cleaned up after our meager dinner, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway made us all freeze. We exchanged nervous glances as we heard the front door open and close. Mom's footsteps were slow and hesitant as she made her way to the kitchen. When she appeared in the doorway, I was struck by how small and vulnerable she looked. "Hi," she said softly, her eyes red-rimmed and puffy. There was a moment of tense silence before Dad stepped forward. "Sarah," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "We need to talk. All of us." Mom nodded, looking both relieved and terrified. "I know," she whispered. We gathered in the living room, the four of us perched awkwardly on the edges of our seats. For a long moment, no one seemed to know how to start. Finally, Mom took a deep breath. "I'm so sorry," she said, her voice cracking. "What I did last night. It was inexcusable. I've been struggling for a long time, and I've been too proud, too scared to admit it. But I can't go on like this anymore." She looked at each of us in turn, her eyes filled with remorse. "I've decided to check myself into a treatment facility," she continued. "I need help, and I want to get better. For all of us." The news hit us like a thunderbolt. Lily burst into tears, and I felt my own eyes welling up. Dad reached out and took Mom's hand, squeezing it gently. "We're here for you, Sarah," he said. "Whatever you need." Over the next hour, we talked more openly than we ever had before. Mom explained more about her struggles with depression and anxiety, and how she'd been trying to handle it on her own for years. Dad shared his feelings of helplessness and guilt for not pushing harder for her to get help. Lily and I talked about our confusion and hurt, but also our love and support for both of them. It wasn't an easy conversation. There were tears, raised voices, and moments of painful silence. But by the end of it, I felt like we'd taken the first step on a long journey of healing. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Mom checked into the treatment facility, and we adjusted to life without her at home. It was strange and sometimes difficult, but we supported each other as best we could. We started family therapy sessions, which were challenging but ultimately helpful. Slowly but surely, things began to improve. Mom's treatment was going well, and when she came home for visits, we could see the positive changes in her. Dad seemed less burdened, more open with his feelings. Lily and I grew closer, leaning on each other in ways we never had before. It wasn't all smooth sailing. There were setbacks, arguments, and days when it felt like we were right back where we started. But we kept pushing forward, kept talking, kept trying. Now, 6 months later, our family isn't perfect. We still have our issues, and we're still learning how to communicate and support each other better. But we're in a much better place than we were that fateful night. Mom's back home now, continuing her treatment as an outpatient. She and Lily have finally tackled the closet together, turning it into a bonding experience rather than a source of conflict. Dad's opened up more about his own struggles and is learning to share the emotional load instead of carrying it all himself. As for me, I've learned more about mental health, family dynamics, and the importance of honest communication than I ever thought possible. It's been a tough journey, but seeing my family healing and growing closer has made it all worthwhile. That night when everything fell apart was one of the worst experiences of my life. But in a way, it was also a blessing in disguise. It forced us to confront our problems head-on and start the difficult but necessary process of healing. We're not at the end of our journey yet, in many ways, we're just beginning. But now, when I look at my family, I don't just see the broken pieces of that terrible night. I see hope, strength, and the unbreakable bonds that will help us face whatever challenges lie ahead.